Hello, everyone. Welcome to another episode of the Cultured Pull List. In this week's episode, we're finishing up our coverage of Daredevil and Elektra, the Red Fist Saga by Chip Zdarsky. I'm covering part two. So, yeah, without further ado, let's get into it. Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Cultured Pull List, part of the Cultured Universe podcast and network. In this show, we just talk about all things comics. Generally, we review a specific story or a story arc, and then we talk about some comic news and some newer issues that have released. But yeah, this week we are covering part two of Chip Zdarsky's Daredevil and Elektra, the Red Fist Saga. If you did not see our first part, definitely check that out from last week. But yeah, not a whole lot of news this week. Really, the only thing I had news wise was apparently the first issue of the new Ultimate Spider Man run is getting a fifth printing. Apparently, the
Wow.
first four printings are selling out. Yeah, I didn't even know they. I knew they had two printings. I didn't know they even had three and four. So yeah, that comes out on May 1st. And yeah, if you haven't been able to get your hands on it so far, I would definitely suggest checking that out. It's a really cool reimagining of Spider-Man, and obviously quite popular. So,
Mhm.
yeah, if you haven't already, get your hands on the fifth printing of this book in coming out May 1st. Only other thing I really wanted to talk about was something I forgot to mention last week. Last week, I was a guest on the Superhero Cuts podcast. Had a great fun with had a lot of fun with Stevie and Jerry on there. They're a couple of great guys. So if
Hmm.
you aren't following Superhero Cuts on YouTube or Instagram or anything, definitely check them out. They're really fun guys and know their stuff. We had a great conversation, and yeah, check out that episode of their podcast on YouTube. Let's get into the book itself. Now, yeah, like I said, if you didn't check out last week and you want to know what's actually going on, definitely check out our last week's episode.
Mm.
And kind of went through some backstory that episode as well of like where Daredevil's at when this series starts. But like I mentioned last week, this is the last Chip Zdarsky run. He'd been working on Daredevil, I think, since like 2019, maybe 2018. And like Marvel, really comics in general like to do, they sort of like reboot the whole series like every 2 years
Yeah,
for
yeah.
no real reason. Like there's some series that keep going on forever, but a lot of times they just reboot them. So this is like the final reboot, but it's still kind of a continuation of Chip Zdarsky's whole Daredevil run. But yeah, this week we're covering issues 8 through 14, the full 14 issue series. We're wrapping that up. And yeah, so this was, like I said before, this was written by Chip Zdarsky with art by Marco Cecchetto, Rafael de la Torre, and Manuel Garcia. The colorists were Matthew Wilson with Eric Arciniega, and the letterer was VC's Clayton Cowles. And these issues were released starting on February 2023, and the last issue was released in August of 2023. All right, so where we left off, Daredevil and the Fist were preparing to go to war, go to battle with the Hand, because the Hand had kidnapped one of the guys, Bullet, that Daredevil liberated from the raft. The Hand had kidnapped Bullet's son and Bullet as well. So Daredevil, even though Daredevil felt that the Fist wasn't ready really to take on the Hand, they still had to go and rescue Bullet and his son and go to war against, the Hand and the Fist of the Hand, Frank Castle, aka the Punisher. So the war, the battle starts. The Hand has a dragon and an army of the undead, along with the Punisher on their side. And Cole ends up facing off against a mind controlled Bullet. The Hand didn't just kidnap Bullet; they also kind of took control of his mind. and Daredevil faces off with his sometimes friend, sometimes enemy, but obviously enemy in this case, Frank Castle, and they start fighting it out. And there's a big dragon, but Miss Stiltman takes down the dragon at least for a while. And there's just like a lot of fighting going on. Cole ends up almost being beaten by Bullet, but then Agony ends up using her powers to free Bullet from the hand's mind control, and then Cole goes off and he ends up saving Bullet's son. And meanwhile, Daredevil and Punisher are still fighting, and Punisher kind of gets the upper hand for a bit, but then Daredevil, with his like increased senses and strength from the fist magic, is able to overpower him. And there's this interesting kind of inner monologue of Daredevil's where he's, even though like he's against killing, he's kind of like justifying in his mind potentially killing Frank. And he's also kind of justifying killing members of the hand because they're like, in his mind that he says that they're basically like evil incarnate and like spawns of the devil, basically. Meanwhile, Elektra is fighting her old master, Aka, and Aka ends up stabbing Elektra, but Speed Demon ends up saving Elektra before Aka can kill her. And Elektra was actually able to take Aka's necklace or amulet during the confusion during the fight. And meanwhile, Daredevil ends up hopping on top of the dragon, which was overpowering his men, and is able to apparently the dragon was under the hand's control as well, and he's able to free the dragon from their control, but he ends up jumping off and kind of just falling to his doom. But Stiltman ends up catching him, and during the fight with Castle, Daredevil ended up losing one of his eyes. But the hand is able to kind of overpower the fist, but with Bullet and his son rescued the fist and the Daredevil's retreat, and even though they kind of lost, they're kind of okay with it because they accomplished their mission. And then we see that because Daredevil and his group left their island, apparently that they were under some sort of magical veil that was concealing them. But since they left, they were able to be seen by the Avengers, who are preparing to go and arrest Daredevil for the different crimes he and Elektra have committed, including Elektra. Kind of like she killed the president, but he was actually like a undead puppet of the hand. They had actually killed the president and replaced him with like the doppelganger. And also the whole thing with Daredevil releasing a bunch and trying to reform a bunch of criminals from the raft. Next, we see Aka meeting with the Stromwinds, who we saw last episode, and they've been kind of major players in Daredevil's life recently. Like they aligned with Kingpin, and Daredevil and Elektra ended up stealing like $3 billion from them while they were taking down the Kingpin. But turns out that they were in bed with the hand the whole time, and they had kind of plans to use the hand, and the hand kind of was using their resources. Um, so Aka meets with them, but the Stromwinds kind of tell Aka to stand down and that they're going to take care of things from here. So next we see Matt awakens from recovering from the battle, and Elektra is trying to destroy the amulet she took from Aka, because apparently that amulet was how they're controlling people and replacing people with like undead puppets. Um, so while she's trying to do that, Matt's kind of surveying how hard of a hit they took. They have a lot of dead and injured, but in his mind, he feels like it was worth it for kind of their cause, their holy crusade against the hand. And he seems to think that their crusade is like ordained by God, basically. And Cole comes to him and tries to ask him what's next, but Daredevil doesn't seem like he's even close to being done until the hand is destroyed. But Cole's not okay with that, given how many people have already died and how much they've lost. So he ends up getting ready to leave. And then Daredevil sees that Doc Samson, Dr. Sasquatch, is leaving as well, along with Bullet and his son. And he basically chides Matt for bringing the villains he freed into battle too quickly, because it basically just undid all of the rehabilitation Doc Samson was trying to do with them. And Matt's not super happy about all that or him leaving. But as he's trying to kind of rein in his emotions, he hears something beeping up in the mountains, and looks like some box was airdropped in. Turns out it's a sat phone, and Quinn Stromwin basically is just kind of gloating to Daredevil, saying, ends up telling him that the Avengers are coming, and this is kind of payback for all the stuff Daredevil has done to try and stop the Stromwinds. So Daredevil runs back to the Mountain Fist base, but some missiles end up being dropped from a plane. There, it's Stromwind's doing, and the bombs end up having this like nerve agent that affects people's minds and turns them into raging beasts, basically. So Daredevil's trying to get everyone away from that, but he only really succeeds in saving Foggy. And meanwhile, Elektra and Stick are still trying to destroy the amulet. But as the amulet is being destroyed, finally, Foggy reveals to Matt that he's actually been dead for a while, and he's at this Foggy we've seen has actually has been one of the Hand's undead puppet people. And then we also see that Stick was one as well, and he was killed by the Hand a long time ago. Meanwhile, all of the fists, um, I don't know what to call them, acolytes, I guess, like all the villains and troops are fighting each other because of the nerve agent, and Daredevil and Elektra go out to try and stop them. Just when the Avengers show up, and the Avengers attempt to arrest the Daredevils, but Matt's basically like, screw off. He basically tries to defend his actions, but the Avengers aren't listening, and there's kind of an interesting exchange where Daredevil tries to like say that their way doesn't work, and that they're just content to just take super villains and throw them away, and then like make them even more desperate in prison. So then when they inevitably break out, they're even more messed up. And Captain America tries to say like, oh well, you can't just go off and do your own thing. You have to change the system from within. But nobody's really buying each other's whatever. So they end up just fighting, and eventually Spider-Man and Daredevil kind of duke it out, and Daredevil's able to kind of hold his own with Spider-Man due to his magically enhanced senses and strength and everything. And meanwhile, the Avengers are basically just trying to round up all of the escaped villains and bring them back to prison. But Elektra tries to stop them, but she's eventually apprehended and arrested by Captain America. But Cole is able to escape and not be affected by the nerve gas. Meanwhile, Spider-Man's still chasing after Daredevil, and for a second there, he thinks that he convinces Matt to kind of surrender, and he says that like he'll try and help him and be like fight for him and be on his side when he gets arrested. But in reality, Matt's just trying to get to his web cartridge, which he like unloads and traps Spider-Man, and he ends up using this nerve pinch to knock out Spider-Man. And in the inner monologue of Daredevil, we learn that it's basically taking so much force to apply that nerve pinch that it almost breaks the bones in Daredevil's hand, just kind of showing how durable Spider-Man is. I thought that was interesting. But Matt then goes off to try and find the book. Elektra earlier had told him to go find the book to save it because they need it to take down the Hand. But at this point, Matt just wants to make sure it doesn't fall into the wrong hands. He's even okay with destroying it. But when he finds the book, it's in the hands of Goldie, who we saw earlier, who has this power dampening collar on. But um, Daredevil asks Goldie if like this is all his doing, like the Avengers and the Stromwinds, if this is part of his like plan to kind of make Daredevil a better Daredevil. But Goldie says that he hasn't been able to do anything because of the collar, and this is all this bad stuff is Matt's doing. He kind of did it to himself. So then Matt breaks Goldman's collar and says that he needs his help. Like he needs to know what to do to get out of this situation. So Goldie ends up taking a rock and throwing it at the mountain, which causes an avalanche, which causes the Avengers to retreat with all of Matt's men. And Spider-Man breaks through with his webs and tries to save Matt, but Captain America stops him and has him get on the jet with the rest of the Avengers and prisoners. And Matt is able to take the book from Goldie, and it's not really clear, but it looks like Goldie kind of gets buried in the avalanche, and Matt ends up just kind of jumping into the avalanche himself, but he's able to ride it out and survive. But Spider-Man all he sees is the avalanche, and he knows Matt's trapped in it, and he thinks that Matt dies. Then we see 3 weeks later, Cole has come back to New York City, and he never actually quit his job in Eternal Affairs. He just kind of he took an extended vacation, a leave of absence to help Daredevil out with the Fist stuff. But when he comes back, he resigns and says that he doesn't really believe in the system anymore. And even being in Internal Affairs, he says, is just basically what did he say? He says it's basically just PR for a broken system. So he ends up quitting, and we see like a flashback of him seeing the whole Fist Island being burnt to the ground, thanks to the Stromwinds and the Avengers. So then we see that Matt has been crashing at Cole's place the last 3 weeks, but it seems like he just kind of been like wallowing in self pity and hasn't really been doing anything, even though he's recovered. And Cole, albeit violently, tells him to stop feeling sorry for himself and go do something. So he kind of kicks him out of his house, but he gives him some money to get him kind of back on his feet. So Matt ends up walking through the city, going to the old places where he felt that he failed, either the spot where he accidentally killed a criminal and a few other places, and he ends up at Foggy's old house. So he ends up staying there, and while there he ends up reading the book of the Fist. He's still able to magically read it, and on the pages he's able to decipher what he needs to do next, and kind of fulfill the prophecy and destroy the hand. So then we cut to the Stromwinds. Quinn Stromwind shows up at their office. I think was it Quinn and Una. Una is the sister. And right as he starts talking to his sister, Daredevil shows up, and they think he's there to attack them, but actually he kind of kneels down in front of them and says that they've beat him, that he's been destroyed, and he says that he'll surrender to their will and basically be their personal like not really hitman. He says he won't kill anybody, but they'll basically have him in his pocket, um, as long as they free Elektra and wipe her criminal record. So they aren't really convinced, though. They think he could just be lying. So to prove himself to them, he ends up taking his knives and gouging out his eyes, which one of them is a fake eye, but still, yeah, it looks pretty painful. And at that point, they're convinced. So Uma Strong, isn't it Uma? I keep forgetting. Una ends up making the call to release Elektra and expunge her record, and Quinn starts telling Matt what he wants them to do, what he wants Matt to do. He wants Matt to like get back in the Avengers and be like their eyes and ears in the superhero community. But as soon as Una's done her call, Matt leaps up and grabs Quinn by the throat and ends up threatening him and kind of beating the crap out of him in front of Una, saying like, "You're gonna release all the people that were arrested on my island, like all the people that were part of the Fist, and they're gonna, he basically forces her to arrange their records be wiped clean as well. And while she is complying, he still beats the crap out of Quinn, and he ends up taking his old fake eye and like jamming it into Quinn's eye socket, and he leaves. He continues to threaten them and say like, if you come after any of them or Elektra, then he'll like cause him even more pain, and just like basically threatens to like do everything but kill them, basically. So then he breaks the window and escapes, and with the his men and Elektra released from prison, now safe from the Stromwinds, Matt feels that his mission is done. He thinks the only thing he has left to do is to die, and that's how that half ends.
So this picks up right with all of the villains. They're being let out, and they got the clean record and all that. And then Daredevil goes to Japan, where there's this guy. He says who he is. Oh, he's Blind Spot. Sam Chung Blind Spot. He's like guarding this cave, and it is the so obviously the only way to hell is to die, but like it's the cave that the beast goes through to enter the world, and anyone who dies in proximity of the cave, even if they were a good person, still goes to hell just because the cave is so powerful. And then it flashes back to Stick telling Blind Spot about to guard the cave until Daredevil shows up, and then he can leave pretty much. And so Daredevil tells Blind Spot to just kind of have a good life, and he's like, I don't know if I can do that, but I'll try. And then uh, Daredevil's about to kill himself to go to hell to fight the beast, but then Elektra's there to try to stop him. And they fight for a bit, and there's a flashback where it shows like different, kind of like what happened last week, where there's different art styles for all the different eras. And eventually, because like the internal monologue is kind of talking about how Elektra was a killer, but she's not anymore. So Daredevil kind of like manipulates her with like the ropes to like accidentally stab him and kill him. So that's how he dies. And then he wakes up like in the cave with an apparition of his father. Um, and then he descends the stairs and he gets a new suit, a white suit. And then he's in hell. And there's a little bit about how like this is technically not like hell. Like Mephisto's hell is different. This is like a different hell. Whatever. It's hell enough. And then he meets up with Karen and his what looked to be Karen and his brother, but then they're just demons and he fights them. And there's this shot of him jumping into a pit, and then he walks for what seems like days going through hell fighting demons, and then he meets up with Foggy and all of his friends who are in this cell. And then this is the beast of the hand, and then the apparition that was guiding him through hell uh, dies and turns into a different monster. It turns out it was the beast's sister, and so they're fighting. And it turns out that kind of they were just kind of manipulating Daredevil this whole time to get to this moment so they can kill each other in hell.
Yeah, because like the whole time Matt kind of thought he was following God's plan with
Right.
the fist, and it turns out the fist worshipped the beast's sister, and they were
Hmm.
basically just being manipulated by her.
Yep.
I think
Yep.
she's called like the Wild or something.
So then as the monsters are fighting, Daredevil breaks all his friends out, and then as they go away, Daredevil. There's this moment where he like puts his sticks on his head, and then he pulls them out, and they turn into like lightsabers. And so he's fighting them, and then he gets his arm sliced off, and he's there, and he has this moment with Foggy, and he tells Foggy to run, and then they all get out through the cave, but Daredevil didn't make it. And then this last issue is kind of like an epilogue where we flash to all different kinds of people. Like I'm not sure how long it says it's been, but it's been a minute since
I think
the
it's
last
been.
issue.
I think at some point Foggy says it's been 6 months.
6 months. Okay, yeah. We pick up at this bookstore with a mom and daughter trying to. I'm not sure what exactly it is they're doing, but they're somehow helping children in some way. And then we cut to Foggy's law practice, where he's helping some woman with a lawsuit, and Cole is there too. Cole is his new partner. There was these two guys who are working for Kingpin's son. Butch is his name, and Elektra attacks them, and she's working with this character. I don't know, Alice. I'm not sure who that is, but
Yeah, I don't really know either, and she doesn't really show up in later issues of stuff with Elektra, so I'm not really sure who she is, to be honest.
okay, just some kid with a laptop, and then
Yeah, yeah.
so Elektra shows up to Butch's house, and she's like, "What's going on with these guys? They had a bunch. Well, they had guns, but then the guns were gone." And so she's like, "What's going on with that?" And he's like, "Oh, I was getting them out of the city." And she's like, "Yeah, I don't believe you." So then she's kind of mad about him. And she's one thing I didn't mention actually with the law. This panel over here, Foggy thought he saw Matt in the crowd, but he didn't. And then we're back here with Butch, and Elektra gets really mad, and she starts destroying all these different art pieces. And she looks at a picture of Jesus, and she thought she sees Matt, but it's obviously a painting of Jesus. And then there's this scene with Foggy and Reed Richards, and they're talking about Matt, and Foggy gives him a chessboard, and he's talking about, and then they talk about God for a little bit, and how Reed Richards, being a stereotypical man of science, doesn't really believe in the afterlife or supernaturals or anything like that. And then this is a different store, not the bookstore from the beginning. It's a different store. It's a party store, and this woman who owns the party store is being harassed by two people who sell drugs. And then Elektra shows up and beats them up. And this lady recognizes her as Daredevil, and they talk for a bit, but then she sees this guy, this blind guy, walk around the corner, and she thinks it's Matt, but it's a priest from a nearby Catholic church who just looks like Matt. And they talk for a little bit about grief and that sort of thing, and then Electra leaves, and then we stay with the priest for a little while, and then he leaves the church, and then he passed by an alley where people would be getting mugged, and he beats them up. So that is the end of the story.
All right, yeah, and that kind of it was a bit nebulous in that issue, but when like the new Daredevil like story, like there's like a new series that started right after that with a different writer, but like it's pretty much confirmed that that is
Yeah.
Matt kind of reincarnated. They still haven't
Mm.
100% revealed how or why that happened yet,
Hmm.
but he is like he has been for some reason kind of had his life restarted, but now as a priest, and
Okay.
eventually his memories come back and he remembers he's Daredevil and everything,
Mm.
and a bunch of like demons ended up following him out of hell.
Ah,
So the new series, he's basically fighting them and sending them back to hell, um,
that's
which
nice.
is interesting. Yeah, well, and they're all like possessing people close to him. Like the first one possesses
Mm.
Elektra, and
Okay.
then Ben Urich and She Hulk. And in the newest
Mm.
issue, one of them I think possesses Wolverine. So he's
Oh,
basically having to like fight his friends and excise the
yeah.
demons and stuff. It's kind of interesting. But they still haven't said like how he's back 100%. So I'm kind of
Mm.
curious how that ends up
Right.
shaping
Right.
up. But yeah, like I said last week, I've read most of these before, just kind of out of order. So it was kind of nice to
Hmm.
return and actually have like the coherent narrative, you know. But yeah, what did you think? Now that
I
we've read
enjoyed it. I mean,
everything.
as I've said before, I'm a big fan of like when characters go to hell and there's like demonic
Yeah,
imagery and stuff. I think that's a
yeah,
lot of fun, and this does that
yeah,
really well. And
yeah.
there's some fun action, and yeah, it was good. Um, there was that whole thing with like Daredevil being like a man of God and being on his mission, and I didn't really
Hmm.
go anywhere, and I was kind of confused with what was the point of that. Like, I mean, I know he's like a Christian character, but there was
Hmm.
a big emphasis on that in this story, and I didn't really seem to go anywhere specifically. I mean, there was that bit at the end, but like even after that point, he still mentions God, and so it's kind of nebulous, I think.
It is kind of nebulous. I feel like that was more there to just see Matt kind of wrestling with his faith, I guess.
Okay.
Because there were parts like when I didn't mention it, but like when the Avengers attacked at one point, you know, and like everyone like he kind of like doubted that God, like he said
Mm,
something along the lines of like God died when we killed his son or something like that.
right.
But yeah, I feel like it was kind of just there to be like, I guess, consistent with his character's faith, I guess, but
Okay.
and
Yeah.
like, at the end, it kinda seemed like he was kind of, like, getting some holy power or something when he was in hell,
Yeah. That's
fighting
true.
the demons. They don't, like, come right out and, have, like, an angel appear or anything. It's more, like, through the
Right.
monologue where Matt goes, like, "I have God on my side," you know?
Hmm.
Um,
Hmm.
yeah, I kind of agree, like, I think that it could have been less nebulous. That would have been kinda nice,
Yeah. Yeah.
but yeah, I really liked, like, this last half was, like, really, like, jam-packed and action-packed with stuff.
Hmm. Hmm.
There's a lot of stuff in, like, that scene where, like, he stabs out his eyes was pretty
Right.
intense. And I like seeing, like, it was you kinda saw Daredevil kind of, as brutal as he could be without
Hmm.
killing, when he, like, attacks the Stromwinds and everything. And what I really like this whole about this whole series, I mentioned this last week, but I do kinda like that it sort of tears Matt down to, like, bare
Yeah.
bones, and kind of sees, we kinda get to see how he gets out of that, how he, ends up dealing with that ultimately, and it seems like
Hmm.
ultimately he's basically just kind of okay with sacrificing himself,
Right.
to save his friends and everything, which was kind of cool. And I think there were some. What I thought was also cool is there was some interesting kind of commentary. Like it wasn't like straight up heavy-handed monologues necessarily, but there was some discussion about like heroes, I guess maybe like versus vigilantes, kind of
Yeah. Yeah.
like the like because there's like the whole thing with Daredevil kind of working outside the law, like
Hmm.
even more
Hmm.
now, like breaking criminals out of prison and everything, trying to reform them. But he also has his own agenda, so he's not 100% like right. But then there's like
Right.
the Avengers who were just kind of there to just kind of uphold the status quo, kind of, and like I think they did a
Hmm.
pretty good job, even though Matt was wrong in a lot of ways. They did a pretty good job kind of making the Avengers sort of feel like the bad guys when they showed up.
Right. Right.
The way they were just kind of showing up and trying to round up the villains, and just didn't really
Mm.
care about anything besides, stopping them because, he broke the law or whatever. Um,
Right.
I thought that was interesting, like that whole conversation where he was talking about how like the system's broken and Cap was saying, "Oh, we got to work in the system to change it," but then they
Mhm.
aren't changing it at all. They're just kind of, like keeping everything the same, just kind of repeating, sending them to jail. They break out, that kind of stuff. And there was some stuff where Matt was like saying that Spider-Man's like the best of us, but he's really naive as well. And I just thought all that was interesting and felt like more of different characters' perspectives than necessarily, like being heavy-handed about it.
Mhm.
Like I feel like you can really toe the line with writing where you kind of just regurgitate your opinion like out into the story, and
Right.
it really comes through as more you're just kind of giving a lecture, or you can
Mhm.
kind of have characters have different perspectives and maybe each of them kind of holds a bit of truth. I think he did
Yeah.
a really good job with that in this story.
Mhm.
And like you said, that whole thing with like, him descending into hell and like killing demons was really cool. And like they didn't really explain it much, but at the same time it's like once you're kind of in hell, all that supernatural stuff, it doesn't really matter.
Right.
You just like
Right.
it kind of became like a level of Doom, the
Mm. For
video
sure.
game where you're just like slaughtering demons and stuff. It was pretty
Yeah.
fun. But
Yeah.
yeah, that was the second half of Daredevil and Elektra, the Red Fist Saga. Pretty interesting. I haven't really read any of the other Chip Zdarsky comics so much. This was kind of like my on ramp to his run with the character. But yeah,
Mhm.
that was our episode. Besides
Yeah.
our cultured picks, so before we wrap things up, I wanted to talk about Justice League versus Godzilla versus Kong #6, the newest one that came out a couple weeks ago. And really, this series is just kind of um like a bunch of 10-year-olds like
Mm.
throwing action figures at each other, and it's kind of great if you like that.
Right.
It's just like a bunch of like it's basically just like the Justice League versus a bunch of monsters. But like the craziest thing in this is they kind of just do everything that you would imagine as like a kid, being like, oh well, if Batman fought Godzilla, he would just make a giant, suit, which he ends up doing in
Mm,
this. He makes like
nice.
a mecha Batman to like, but it's actually to fight Mecha Godzilla because
Mm,
Lex Luthor recreated
right.
Mecha Godzilla to kind of take over everything. And yeah, it's
Mhm,
just kind of like the age old like Batman would be prepared for everything. But in
mhm,
this, he
mhm.
does use like all the Justice League to help him. So like the Flashes help put it together and all that stuff. But then Beast Boy is also in it, and he's actually able to turn into Kong at one point, or like a version of Kong.
Nice.
And I'm I'm guessing probably by the end he's probably going to turn into Godzilla too. So yeah, it's just kind of like like just crazy 10-year-old boy like, oh, wouldn't it be cool if this happened? You know,
Mhm.
yeah. So that's pretty
Nice.
fun. But yeah, what did you have this week?
Yeah, this week I picked up Nightwing 112. This is the continuation, obviously, from Nightwing 111 a few weeks ago, and
Yeah.
it picks up with the. It seems like it's only a two-part story. It's kind of a smaller, just mystery kind of where like this kid witnesses parents die, and then he gets abducted by his uncle, and Batman and Nightwing are trying to track him down. And this
Mhm.
issue is interesting because it's kind of retells his Nightwing's origin story, not really like in a narrative sense, but sort of like how the Batman film kind of deconstructed the character. It's kind of like
Okay.
that, how it's
Is it
like
like
introduced.
rebooting his origin?
No, like it doesn't like retell his origin like a story. It kind of like
Mhm.
tells us like in the 2022 Batman movie, it kind
Yeah.
of like introduced us to the character of Batman without really like reiterating his origin story. Kind of feels like that, where it's like
Okay.
telling us like who he is as a character and what he stands for and what like makes him tick, without like going through like the circus and all of that stuff over again.
Okay.
And yeah, it seems like it was just a two issue story. Hopefully, the Tim Toe doesn't drag it out like it does the other ones. Um, but yeah, I thought these two issues were pretty cool.
Cool. Yeah, I know I think pretty soon they're starting like a new like arc. I don't remember
Yeah,
what it's called, but it's I don't know, something. I just remember the cover of like
yeah, with Robin
the
on it. Yeah, I've seen that.
yeah, that, and then there's like with Dick like walking in the snow or something.
Yeah,
I don't.
think Marv Wolfman's gonna come back to write something. I
Oh,
think I heard. I'm not sure.
that could be cool. That could be cool.
Yeah,
How old is that guy now? He's got to be like up there
yeah, he's in his 60s at least.
at least. Yeah, because he's 77. He's almost 80.
77. Wow,
Yeah.
good for him.
Yeah. Yeah, man. I mean, yeah, because he was the creator slash co-creator of Nightwing,
Yep,
right?
in the
Yeah.
80s. Yeah,
Yeah. So that's pretty cool. It's always fun when like a classic writer
right.
comes back. Like I know Dan Jurgens did a lot of the
Mm,
Superman in the 80s and 90s, and he's returned recently for a few different like Superman and Superman adjacent stories. So that's been fun.
nice. Yeah.
Uh, yeah, so that is our episode for this week, everyone. Thank you so much for watching. Hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share. And yeah, if you'd like to help support us, we can keep bringing you more content. You can check us out on patreon.com/slash the cultured nerd and look for our show specific tier. Thank you to all the current Cultured Nerd Patreon supporters: Wesley H., Mitch S., Connor Y., Anna M., Oscar B., Craig L., and Salib K. I have been your host, Michael Malillo, and as usual, I was joined by my co host, Luke S. Our logo and visual assets were designed by Jose Navarro, and our intro was designed by myself. Once again, thank you so much for joining us. If you'd like to check out the Cultured Nerd on social media or check out the Cultured Nerd podcast and YouTube, you can scan the QR code on the bottom left if you're watching this on your TV, your computer. And if you want to check out Casual Experts, which is me and Luke's other brand, which is very much nerdy stuff, pop culture centered stuff, you can check out that by scanning the QR code on the bottom right.